We now welcome Nicholas Grindle, who comes to us from the Centre for the Advancement of Learning and Teaching.
Thank you, Nathaniel. I'd like to talk briefly today about gypsies, and this is related to work which I shall explain in a minute is ongoing, but this is the first time I've really looked at gypsies, and I'm taking this as an opportunity to do so. There is a big question, of course, about whether gypsies constitute a separate race, and so how this theme fits into today's proceedings is maybe slightly open to question. I'd like to start with this painting. I'm sorry these slides aren't bigger. I'll explain what it is for those at the back. This is a small painting, slightly smaller than the size of a sheet of A4 paper, of an Indian girl, painted by a painter called George Morland, who lived and worked in London at the end of the 18th century. And it's this guy who I've been working on for a while and curating an exhibition of his work at the end of this year. And this particular painting is in the Yale Centre for British Art, and it shows what appears to be a kind of an infant or maybe an early teenage girl of probably of Indian descent. And this is the title it's had for a long time, and this is what it's currently its current title at Yale, and this is what it was sold under in auctions in the past. This is another painting, a much larger painting, which is in Cambridge, called Benevolent Sportsman, and it shows a sportsman out on a horse, giving some money, some alms to a small group of gypsies. And what we have here, right in the middle, you won't be able to see it at the back, but is this Indian girl. And it's only working through Morland that I kind of made this connection and realised the Indian girl is not an Indian girl at all. It's a gypsy girl. Morland's contemporaries, people at the end of the 18th century, would have known that this was a group of gypsies. There's a lot of poetry about gypsies, a kind of something of a conflicted attitude. They were admired for their kind of love of liberty. On the other hand, they were recognised as being something of a pest with their thieving ways and so forth, and those tropes were often rolled out. And so this itself is something of a conflicted image. On one hand, it's giving alms to gypsies who need them, but on the other hand, it's the person doing it is probably the landowner, who's probably a JP and therefore responsible for making sure that they move on. This is painted at a time, and the Indian girl is painted at a time when it's first people are first beginning to speculate that gypsies come from India rather than Egypt, which is where the term gypsy comes from. And so it may well be that this kind of conflation of the Indian girl and the gypsy girl is quite kind of historically specific. Painters traditionally paid close attention to the occupations and the dress of gypsies. I'm showing here a painting in the National Gallery by Thomas Gainsborough, a well-known painting called The Watering Place. And in the foreground it's some cattle being watered with a town in the distance, but then over on the left there are a small group of gypsies around a campfire, and they were seen very much as part of the environment, and they make appearance in many landscape paintings of this period and genre paintings as well. And going back to the 17th and 16th centuries, there's the real interest in their the kind of the dress and the habits and the customs of gypsy groups. But it's in this period as well that attention is also paid to skin colour and the way that gypsies are typically understood to be dark. I'm showing here a watercolour drawing by a guy called Thomas Heafy, and it shows a servant, someone preparing food, and then through the window is a gypsy woman. And there's a slightly larger detail, a young gypsy woman with a girl or an infant on her back. And what Heaphy has done is focus on the skin colour, keeping that kind of attention to the habits of gypsies and their occupations, but also and their kind of unusual dress, but also paying quite close attention to a darker skin colour with dark hair, and you can see that as well in the infant. Skin colour had a place in aesthetic theory of the 18th century, as David Beinman has shown. Gypsy women were often seen as very beautiful. And the gypsy lifestyle was seen as picturesque. Now, they're suitable subjects for paintings. But on the other hand, gypsies offered a number of distinct challenges to these canonical ideas about beauty. The beauty of gypsy women was often seen to hide rather than express their moral character. So, in other words, it disguised the fact that they were corrupt and thieving and deceitful people. In the same way, the gypsy, the idea that gypsies was shaped by their environment was also kind of contradicted. The focus on racial theory tended to say in the 18th century that race was the outcome of environmental pressures. This was contradicted by the fact that gypsies, by and large, roaming throughout Europe as the first serious work on gypsies in 1787 put it. They roamed throughout Europe, but always stayed the same colour, and they resisted this kind of assimilation to their environment, both in terms of their skin colour, but also in terms of their habits and customs. So they on the one hand, gypsies conformed to conventional ideas about beauty, but on the other hand, they offered some challenges to it. And what really interests me about them, and this is where I might kind of take this work a bit further, is the idea of gypsies being one particular example of people on the move. So not so much where race is shaped by boundaries, or where racial boundaries can be drawn in a number of ways, both in terms of character, customs, geographies and so forth, but where that notion of boundaries is somewhat problematic. How is it that in terms of gypsies and their representation in the 18th and 19th centuries, it's the case that the certain characteristics of race stay the same and seem kind of resistant to reform, but on the other hand, other characteristics such as their kind of geographical associations aren't really there. Those boundaries simply refuse to be drawn. And I'm afraid I don't have a slide of it, but the other group that I'd like to explore that question in relation to is representations of Jews and Jewish peddlers in particular. There's a kind of a rich history of this kind of remarkably resilient figure, the Jewish peddler, and in the 18th and the 19th century. And again, it's that notion of mobility that kind of interests me. So gypsies tend to be both part of the environment and adhering to conventional ideas about beauty, but on the other hand, they appear to be distinguished from the environment. They don't belong and they refuse to be assimilated. And this makes them both attractive for painters, but as particularly picturesque subjects, but on the other hand, problematic in terms of ideas of race. And I don't know how far this topic might take me, but kind of a quick initial exploration leads me to think it could be to the early 20th century. This is a painting by Laura Knight, who's a Royal Academician in the early 20th century, and it's of a gypsy man, and also on display in Tate at the moment is photographed by August Sander of gypsies as well. Again, this attention both to the specificities, the kind of picaresque character, but also the racial profile comes out quite well. So I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.